Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome to another breathtaking game that could be really useful in your home preparation as white. Welcome to an amazing gameplay by Stockfish 17 against another top engine Ginkgo Santiago in a really spectacular Grünfeld defense. And in this game, Stockfish will play here with white against really one of the most popular openings against d4. And in this game, Stockfish will produce really great attacking ideas. First of all, a beautiful gambit line that has been played many times in chess history, but then afterwards, Stockfish will show us really new attacking methods, really brilliant ideas, really progressive plans with white. So put your seatbelts on and enjoy again in a sharp gameplay by Stockfish 17. So with white, the fish open with the move d4. Ginkgo Santiago's response was knight to f6. We have now c4, g6, knight to c3, and after move d5, we have now the Grünfeld defense. It's really one of the most popular ways, even in top grandmaster, to meet here d4. Stockfish takes after knight to d4, knight to d5. We have now the standard e4, challenging the knight in the center of the board. And now after knight takes c3, b takes c3, white has now the solid center. But of course, black is trying now to battle against the center with this idea bishop to g7 and then put more pressure with c5 and then maybe go for the c3 pawn. Stockfish continues with the normal development and of course protection of the knight on d4. c5 as promised you cannot take because of bishop takes c3, so that's why Stockfish plays a very interesting slide line with the move rook to b1. Stockfish gets out of the potential attack by the dark square bishop, but the downside about this line is that the a2 pawn suddenly becomes weak, and that's now the beautiful gambit line in which Stockfish will simply give up the pawn just in order to continue the pressure in the center of the board. Here we have first of all castling by black, we have bishop to e2, and now there are two choices how you can make further progress from black's perspective against the pawn on d4. One of the ideas is to play knight to c6, or maybe here c takes d4 like Ginkgo Santiago did, but then afterwards with queen to a5. If you play here knight to c6, this line is usually met also with the gambit line by white with the move d5. You allow here this pawn to be taken, and then you play bishop to d2, and then after bishop takes d2, queen to d2, black has to lose another tempo. White continues still the game with the space advantage. Has been played many times in chess history. I'm not a big fan of this line because it simply releases the pressure too much. Too many pieces are traded off immediately in the early stage of the game. So with the space advantage, I think white should be perfectly fine, but without any complications, I think, here for both sides. But okay, here after bishop to e2, we have now c takes d4 by Ginkgo Santiago. Black Stockfish of course takes, and now comes this idea with queen to a5, hitting the king and also hitting the pawn on a2. And now comes bishop to b2. Stockfish sacrifices now pawn, but now plays first of all kingside cast. And okay, let's stop and evaluate the position immediately, because many of us would be scared maybe to play this wild line. You gave up a pawn. What's actually the advantage that white has here for the lost pawn? When it comes to positional advantages, we have to also mention immediately here this central control. White has this powerful mobile center, which of course restricts many squares on black side of the board. And also white has now a much faster development because all the pieces of white are already out. The rook has already activated itself here on the b file. The queen, although didn't play, has already a great activity towards the center, towards the queen side, towards the king side. And what we have to also mention, black is lacking in development, and black has to also play a couple more moves with the queen, because the queen is a little bit endangered. It's not like you will trap the queen, but white can get an extra tempo, maybe or 2, 3, 4 tempi by attacking the queen, and then white improves simply the position of its minor pieces. Meanwhile, black is just playing with the queen. So that's, I think, a decent compensation for the lost pawn. So it's, I think, really an aggressive line, but I think a very effective line here that Stockfish choose to play. We have now bishop to d7, and what I liked really about the game now by Stockfish is that Stockfish didn't take the pawn immediately on b7. You can do it, but then with rook to c8, the black can also, I think, activate a couple of pieces. Will also try to get maybe the rook even on the second rank. Will attack maybe here many pieces. So Stockfish is saying, I don't want to take your pawns. I have already a great activity. Stockfish plays now a very interesting rook to a1. Now the queen drops back, and Stockfish continues now with queen to b1. We have now an attack against the pawn, but also the protection of the e4 pawn. We have now queen to d6, and now comes another novelty here by Stockfish. Stockfish plays now the amazing e5. And what I again liked is that again Stockfish didn't pick up the pawn on b7. If you maybe asking yourself the question, why didn't Stockfish pick up now finally the pawn on b7? Because of this line, bishop to c6, you get an attack against the queen. Now suddenly white has to retreat with the queen, so Stockfish relies, I think, here more and more on piece activity than just to grab some pawns. And you see now Stockfish suddenly loses another tempo, and actually black can even take out this pawn, which is not really such a bad line here for black, because if you play bishop to h6, then black will simply retreat, and after a couple more moves, I think this should be an equal game. Black is even up a pawn. The queen is a little bit stuck to the defense of the e4 pawn. Again, white should be slightly better when it comes to piece activity, but again the game is now simplified, and with this extra pawn this could be a headache here for white. So that's why this line is also not good. Even if you pick up maybe here after bishop to d4, now the bishop on d4, then after queen to d4, again my Stockfish engine at home doesn't like this line, because you can maybe try this attacking idea, then black will simply step back. You're trying maybe attack to a rook further, but now with e6 we can lock out now this diagonal, and the issue is you cannot immediately attack the queen, because you have also something to worry here on e4. So you could maybe try, I don't know, to play queen to c1 to prepare rook to d1, because after knight to d7 now, after rook to d1, queen to e4 is not working because of bishop to f3. But of course black doesn't have to play the game like this. Black will of course try in this line to cover the dark squares, because black lost the dark square bishop in this potential line, this imaginary line. Now you have to secure the dark squares, and maybe white can just, I don't know, try to attack the queen, then maybe again attack the queen. So as I said, my Stockfish engine at home evaluates this position as 0.0, so no advantage for any side. So that's why e5, brilliant move without again taking the pawn on b7. So if you're playing this line, if you're playing this opening, don't pick up the pawn. We should really trust now in Stockfish strength in this line. After move e5 here, Ginkgo Santiago retreats to c6. Stockfish attacks now the pawn on e7. We have now bishop to f5, a counter attack here by black, and now Stockfish improves the position of the queen with queen to b3. e6, we have queen to a3, and Stockfish targets now the dark squares all over the board, because the only really good defender of black's king is now the bishop on g7, and Stockfish wants to trade it off, but not immediately. Stockfish says, I'll try first of all to attack further pieces, and when the time is right, maybe I'll do something against the dark square bishop. We have now queen to d5, which is, I think, also pragmatic and natural move by black, because when Stockfish pushed the pawn on e5, Stockfish created two basic weaknesses in the position, which is also something that we have to know. Stockfish created the backward pawn on d4 and also a weak square on d5. And one of the main strategic goals when you play against the backward pawn is, of course, to create a blockade against this pawn. So it's, I think, here really good move by Ginkgo Santiago. We have now rook from a to c1, knight to c6. Finally, the knight is out, and now h3. Stockfish notices now the problem of the light square bishop on f5, and here, believe me or not, Ginkgo Santiago doesn't react correctly. Stockfish is, of course, a tactical beast, and that's, I think, a huge advantage against other top engines. When Stockfish is calculating these tactical sequences, basically it gets out always in a better way. Stockfish basically cannot lose, I would say, tactically. When there is a tactic, Stockfish will find a tactic. Usually, Stockfish is losing some games strategically, when it maybe blocks out its own bishop or something, when it really doesn't find, I don't know, the best activities for its pieces. But when it comes to pure really sequences that have a start and an ending, I think Stockfish cannot be outplayed. So now with the move h3, in order to stay in the game, black has to find really the optimal moves. And the optimal move, first of all, and I would say still, even if black plays the optimal move, still white should be better. But here, after move knight to b4, at least you're battling somehow. In the game, h5 has been played by Ginkgo Santiago because black was worried about the potential g4 move. But this move weakens the structure. Too much will come, of course, to this line. But let's see now this option that black should have played. After knight to b4, now rook to c5 would be probably the best next move for white. And then after queen to e4, then probably white would step back here with queen to d2, because now in this line, you don't want to trade off the queens, because with extra material. If this game reaches the fully endgame stage, then black could of course win the game, because you want to complicate things further. And now after queen to d2, rook from f to c8, the bad part here is when you play g4 immediately for white. I wanted to show you how very complicated this sequence is. If you play now g4, this wouldn't be good, because after rook to c5 and d takes e5, actually black can take bishop to g4, h6 g4, queen to g4, king to h1, and now knight to d5. Although down a piece, black has a great compensation here, has now this powerful knight on d5. The king of whites is endangered. We can maybe even start to push some pawns. This is a weak pawn. The knight is always stuck to the defense of the pawn. The knight is also overloaded to the defense of bishop on g5, so it's, I think, a playable line now for black. But of course, here in this imaginary line, I'm going to dive deeper into this line, because I think it's really the critical moment of the game. Here, instead of this move g4, what white should play, and instead of this move, is of course to play first of all rook to c8, releasing the pressure, and then after something like rook to c8, now you can finally play the move g4. Now in this imaginary line, black should not go with rook to c2. Seems also tempting that you're going maybe into a counter attack, but then look at this. After queen takes b4, you can maybe try bishop to f8, because the huge threat is queen to e7. Then you try bishop to f8, but now we try to attack this way. You may be trying to pick up here the piece also on e2, but now after g takes f5 and queen to f5, now suddenly you can survive this attack by black. The huge difference in this line is that in this previous line that we have discussed, the knight was still on the board. It was really active, and also the pawn on d4 was disconnected from the pawn on e5. It actually ended on c5. So from a positional point of view, keeping the knight was, I think, crucial for black in any of this line, so it's simply not working. So as I said here, after queen to b4, I don't know, you can also try maybe rook to e2, but then you're running into this queen to e7, you're trying bishop to f8. Look at this, we attack the bishop. You can even pick up now maybe here the pawn on g4, but the issue is also this tactic. So the back rank problem is something also that bothers now black in the continuation of the game. So as I said, after rook to c8, rook takes c8, and g4, what black needs now to play instead of rook to c2, that was a mistake, as we said, is now to finally play bishop to g4. Then after h6 g4, queen to g4, king to h2, and then maybe with a5. Here white is still better, but you're battling somehow. You have a compensation. You can again fix the knight on d5, and I think this could be somehow a line that black could survive. But after move h3, what Ginkgo Santiago did was now the move h5, but this is not working because Stockfish plays of course, first of all, bishop to c4, the queen draws back to d7, queen to e4 here is not working because of queen to c3, then you're trying rook to c8, and then after rook to e1, actually the queen gets trapped. Really wild stuff. So look at this, the queen doesn't have good squares on this side of the board. In the center, you'll probably have to give up now the queen for the rook, and it's game over, of course, for black. So after bishop to c4, that's why black tried queen to d7, but now queen to f4, and look how Stockfish pushed away all of the pieces of black. Now again, black is on the defensive side, and suddenly all of the squares for the light square bishops are taken, and now Stockfish is threatening now the move g4. It's a similar concept like in the previous game that we have analyzed in this beautiful World Chess Championship match between Gukesh against Ding Liren, where also in a certain way Gukesh managed to trap somehow Ding Liren's bishop. So now also there is nothing that can be done against the move g4. What Ginkgo Santiago tried is now the move knight to b4. Stockfish continues now with g4. We have now b5, also a counter attack, but now Stockfish has this one. After g takes f5, and after b takes c4, now comes the stunning idea f6. And look at this bishop on h8 is now simply trapped. It's simply out of game. So okay, you get now your pieces back, the material is equal, or black still has some extra pawn here, but the issue is that the bishop is now out of game. It will not participate till the end. Now it's simply locked, and now Stockfish has to somehow maybe stop these pawns, or also improve a little bit the position of its pieces. But then afterwards, when we reach now the fully endgame stage, this should be completely winning here for white. Really amazing strategies here by Stockfish. Now comes rook to c4. Stockfish grabs a pawn, knight to d5. You have a great square now for the knight. Finally you fixed it, but the downside is, of course, that the bishop is out of game. Queen to d2, we have rook to b8, queen to c2. Stockfish trades off everything. Why not? Because Stockfish wants really to clear everything off the board and maybe reach even a fully endgame stage where only, I don't know, the knight and the bishops are on the board, maybe even without the queens and the rooks. Still, of course, black has maybe something with this pawn, but I think white's king is close enough. So Stockfish wants to now trade off the pieces. I think it's not really a complicated strategy here by white. We have queen to d3, queen to b7. Even if you try, I don't know, rook to a8 to start to push the pawn, then knight to h4. The issue is if you try something like a5, then also there are some tactics. I want to also demonstrate to you there. Also, there are tactical possibilities against black's king, because after f takes g6, queen to g6, again, you have to cover with the bishop, because if you try to do something like this, then bishop to h6, and again, with the same pattern, so you're getting destroyed. So knight to h4, then you have to play king to h7, but then bishop to c1, I don't know, a5, and now knight to f3 with some threats of knight to g5. So again, I would say black didn't solve any tactical problem on the king side. So here, that's why after queen to d3, queen to b7, rook to b1, great move, an attack against the queen, and now another beautiful move, queen to a6, not allowing this pawn to move, at least not immediately. And now after knight to c7, Stockfish plays the move that we have talked about, queen to b7. This is a great move, I would say, because Stockfish, as I mentioned, really wants to reach now the fully endgame stage, and maybe with some light square problems when the queens are on the board, maybe in some crazy tactics could be possible. So for black, so now when the queens are off the board, nothing really can happen against white's king. So that's why great move here by the fish. a5, knight to d2, knight to d5, knight to e4. Stockfish improves now the position of these pieces, knight to b4, and now finally queen takes a8, rook takes a8, bishop to d2. You cannot push the pawn again. Look how Stockfish is not allowing this pawn to be pushed in a beautiful tactical way. We have now knight to d5, bishop to c1, knight to b4, knight to g5, and now rook to d8. Now comes another brilliant move, bishop to a3. If you play here rook to d4, then the issue is rook to c1 is actually winning the game, because if you try to play rook to d7, then you get checkmated on c8, because the knight is, of course, controlling the h7 square. If you try rook to d8, then you get this one, rook to c7, and the issue is now the f7 pawn is weak. If you protect it, then we attack the pawn here, that's of course connected to the knight, and also the rook is now lined up against the dark square bishop of white. So this is also not working. So again, after bishop to a3, Stockfish solves the positional problems in a beautiful tactical way. We have now rook to d5, knight to f3, Stockfish protects the pawn, and of course improves now the position of the king. g5, okay, maybe you can do something here, but the bishop will never be able to come out into the game. We have now rook to b3, and now h4, which was again a bad move, I would say, here by black, but you don't have really anything else. Even if you try g4, h takes g, knight to h2, rook to d5, we pick up this one, then we pick up also this one, and in one moment also this pawn is hanging. So again, nothing that can happen here in a good way for black. After rook to b3, we have h4. Stockfish attacks now the pawn, picks up now the pawn with the bishop, picks up, attacks now further the knight, and now also picks up this one with the knight. We have rook to d7, knight to f3. Again, Stockfish is controlling. Look at this, such a frustrating game here for black. Knight to c6, Stockfish protects now the pawn. Stockfish is not losing any pawns in this game. Afterwards, we have knight to b4, rook to a3, and rook to d5, and after rook to c3. In this particular position, Ginkgo Santiago resigned. Again, you have to control the back rank, because rook to c8 is going to happen. Then there are some tactics with knight to g5, deflecting the king from the defense of the bishop. So now I think you have to even give up here the bishop for knight. Again, the issue is that black has some activity, but always black has to control the back rank. That's, I think, the huge problem. And now, of course, Stockfish can go with rook to c7, rook to a7, going behind the pawn. So whatever black does, I think we can agree it's completely winning game here for Stockfish 17. So great game, great, I would say, strategic and tactical game here by Stockfish. Really, it shows really great skills all over the place, great strategies, great attacking idea with this move e5. Although Stockfish left somehow this backward pawn on d4, Stockfish managed to pull off some really crazy attacking ideas. So in my opinion, really great method to meet and to beat the beautiful Grünfeld Defense. So okay, if you want to see some other beautiful chess games played by Stockfish and also by some other top AIs, check out our commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess, the best, of course.